So this is an interesting video that I feel like I need to make. I've seen a lot of videos recently having to do with disc rot, with video games, music, DVDs, Blu-rays, all sorts of different stuff. I have not seen a video really documenting some of the occurrences that I've run into with disc rot before. There's one case that I actually consider a definitive disc rot, because I feel like it's kind of used loosely as to like anything, any type of degradation of a disk type media or storage compared to a rotting effect of the actual disk itself. And a few years ago, I saw articles that were pretty old articles for the time that described my type of disk rot I've run into, but I've never seen anybody do a video on this type of disc rot. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, I do not have a disc rotted, or fortunately, I don't have a disc rotted disc to show on the camera because I got rid of them like a couple years ago because I noticed whatever discs they were with, it kind of just spread to the other discs. So but let me show you a common disk that this happens to. So I'm going to be particularly talking about just regular old DVD-Rs. DVDs, these are DVD minus Rs. So this is an old, and I mean old, Memorex. Used to be able to get these at Walmart. You probably still can of some sort, but so this is a Memorex DVD minus R. And this is the type of disc that I had disc rot with at one time. So what happens with this disc rot, like a real disc rot, is a lot of these discs, like this Memorex, use a cheap azo dye, which is what you use the DVD or CD drive uses to burn the data on the disc. Happens over time, or as if the disc is improperly handled, put too hot environment or whatever, it helps break it down faster and screw with the dye more. However, in my case, even if the discs were stored properly, this disc doesn't have it happening with it, but it basically looks like a speckledy mold on the inside, like in between the layers of the disc. It just looks like a bunch of speckles. It looks like if you took a spray bottle of water and spritz it on white paper and it has just dots everywhere from the spritzing. It looks like that, but it's in between the layers and it like kind of, it's lighter. And the other thing too is if you smell them, like, fortunately this one doesn't smell that way, but if you smell them, a lot of times they'll have like a failing adhesive smell. Like it'll be like this industrial adhesive smell. And it's basically the dye. I don't know if it's oxidizing or what, but it turns. So you get this horrible smell, and you can still save the data sometimes. You can take it, and, if you can catch it early enough, or when it starts to getting like a fog over it, you can put it in a DVD drive and get the data off of it before it goes to fail and get rid of the disk. If you store it in a case with other disks, I've had, from my experience, every disk that was stored with that, it affected it. So that's what I would actually define as disk rot, and that's the disk rot that I have experienced before. Talking about azo dyes, there were some discs that had forever azos or extended life azos or whatever that basically talked about how durable and how formulated their azo dyes were. This is a verbatim brand CD from, like, God only knows what the hell was on the package of these. Can't believe I'm going to say this about something from when I was a kid. This is a sealed in the package pack of verbatim Data Life Plus Super Azo dyed discs. Unopened. I have a bunch of these that I inherited. These used to be backup CDs, basically. They were high speed and had a superior performance and durability marketing with a Super Azo trademark. Essentially, it had a very nice industrial chemically stable azo dye in them. That I might add on the side actually says Verbatim Corporation 2002, a subsidiary of Mitsubishi Chemical Corporation, and it's got the little Mitsubishi logo right there. These were a high quality azo dye. These discs were manufactured in 2001 and 2002. The durability of those azos were so good, I figured they would be rotted by the time I got a hold of them, opened a case up, and started using them. They were not. They were entirely stable, and everything was good with them. And I could burn to them. They'll do anything that I need them to as a CD. Now, they're CDs in the year of 2024, so... Now, there's one thing, I've seen some people put like silica packets inside of the actual cases with the game to keep them from getting, you know, too much moisture or accelerating the wear and tear on the disc from environmental factors. In theory, good idea. In practice, I have a story behind that. I had a PS2 game. It was a Silent Hill 3. It was a 2-disc set. It had the soundtrack and the game and the manual. In its case, I never really played it because, to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Silent Hill 3. I know, blasphemy, right? Not a huge fan of it, so I always kept it inside of its case. Plus, it was like a Blockbuster case or something. I don't remember. So it had additional value to it. So not only was Silent Hill 3 2-disc set, but it was also from a rental company that doesn't exist. I went to get it out one day to show a friend because she absolutely loved Silent Hill 3, and I was actually considering giving that to them. The problem was I had them over, went to go get it out of the shelf, and pulled the case out, opened the case up, and I'm real particular with taking discs out of cases because, like, I hate the 360 cases. I'll get to that in a minute. But I'm real careful to, like the PS2 cases, you could push the thing down and it'll just pop up and then you just lift it off. There's none of that, like, you know, wrestling it. You be careful with it. I went to do that with the Silent Hill 3 disc and it snapped in half. It had gotten so dry that if you'd have put silica packets in there, it probably would have just exploded because it would have got so dry. It already got so dry that when you tried to get it out of the case, I pushed the button in which case it should have just fell off in my hand. It didn't. I pushed the button in and it cracked the whole disc in half. And I was like, that's crazy. What, did this dry rot? So I went to the other disc because it's a 2-disc and went, well, now I have to know. So I went to take the other disc out and it cracked in half. So I am sitting there with the Silent Hill 3 2-disc set with both of the discs snapped in half because they were, I guess, too dry. So if you're thinking about tossing silica packets in with these to keep them dry so that moisture doesn't ruin your discs, don't do it. Don't do it. You'll run out with snap discs. So the third thing I want to talk about, 360 cases and why I don't like them. And cracked middle rings on discs. I used to work at a used video game store. It wasn't GameStop, I'll give you that much of a hint. So now I generally, and I know, oh my God, everybody's got an opinion on paper sleeves or plastic sleeves or whatever. Yeah, I know they're not the best storage medium for things, but in my opinion, better than this bastard right here. That right there will bust your disc. So what winds up happening, it happened to this disc right here. You go to take your disc out of the case one day, you wind up with a crack right there in your disc. And what happens is you get a little chip and then a crack. When that happens, That crack will try and separate the disc. You can see right there where the layers of the disc are trying to come apart. This disc, this is one of my favorite games. This disc cracked like that, and I didn't have another copy, and this is back when the 360 was current. I didn't have money. What I did is I went to the Dollar Tree and got a $1 tube of super glue brand fix-all adhesive. I wouldn't use super glue because super glue eats plastic practically. It fuses it. Fix-all adhesive goes on kind of rubbery, and I've had this thing glued since, and it still plays. I went by on this until like a year later when we got another copy right here, which unfortunately isn't in a sleeve. It needs to be in a sleeve. There's too many of these cases. Like this one's not too bad. It's got 4 little arrows. You could push those arrows in independently if you really wanted to. There's other cases, they just snap in and then they require you to kind of fuck with it to get it to come off. They crack discs. At the store that I worked at, you'd get discs returned with cracks in them. You would get people trying to come sell their games. You'd open it up, there's a cracked disc in it, or there's a chip on the inside. Tons of that happened. And it's because of those. They went from those PS2 real easy, you just push it like a button and it pops the disc off real easy, to these damn things. So the next thing I want to talk about is Blu-rays. So there's the data is kept on the bottom of the disc label thing. That really only applies to Blu-rays, to my knowledge. So that was one of the things when I worked at the store that I worked at, was you could not buy in a disc that you could see a pinhole through the label by holding the disc up to the sky. There's very, very rare occasions where the disc will work and play perfectly fine if you've got some like really, really good luck. We have a disc right here for that. This is a Little Big Planet 2 special edition disc for the PS3, which is on a Blu-ray. If you raise it up to the light, there's like 2 tiny little marks that I can see through. This disc has like a couple of scratches, real light on the surface, and you can see through it on the bottom. But somehow I've gotten lucky, and this particular disc still reads and works and plays perfectly fine. It's the only case I've seen where that's okay. Normally, if this is scratched and you can see through the disc on this side, it's toast. Like, you got to put it in and play it. You'll make it through a level, maybe, and it'll just crash. It's junk. You're screwed, essentially. This has been the only case where I've had a disc that's still playable like that. I got it off eBay from somebody for damn near nothing, and it plays perfectly fine. So I had no problem with that. These cases, anything that I'm really, really, really particular about, like I love my Twisted Metal games. This one I'm keeping in a sleeve, and it's staying in the side, just like my 360 games. But I would rather have this type of thing holding my disc any day over what the Xbox 360 cases were like. For some reason, some people think that had to do with PS2 games. It didn't. For a great example, I'd have to go dig it out to get a hold of it, but I had a copy, I really, really, really wanted a copy of Backyard Wrestling when I was younger. And at the time, Movie Gallery existed. Movie Gallery's discs were abused as shit. And a lot of times when they would put the labels on them, shit would happen where the label would bubble up. And I remember when they were closing down one of the stores where I used to live, they put up a lot of these discs for sale. And among all those were like Backyard Wrestling 1 and Roadkill and some other things. The Backyard Wrestling disc was fine, but the top of the disc, where the Movie Gallery overlay label would be, had a lump that just went all the way through, so you couldn't you couldn't play it in a regular fat PS2. And if you played it in a flip top PS2, as it spun, it just, and it would fuck with the disc in your motor, and it just wasn't good for your machine. I remember after I got it and it was doing that, for a while I just flattened that bubble out and then kept it going. Eventually it got so bad it was fighting the PS2, and I had no choice but to try and take it off. It was kind of that, just like, oh, I can't play it now, so if I break it, I just can't play it. I peeled the label off of the top of the disc, and it like took a lot of the actual disc printing label off the top. It didn't peel anything else off other than the label of the disc. But you could take that disc, put it in there, play the whole entire campaign, play any feature in it, watch any of the videos on it, not a problem. But that was because it was a normal DVD pressing, not a Blu-ray pressing. So on Blu-rays, a lot of the data, you got 2 layers of data, because there's a lot of storage on a Blu-ray. So there's 2 layers there. There's like a layer on the bottom, and then there's like a layer on the top. But basically where the label is, that's a layer of data. It's like right there on that label practically. So when you have a scratch in the label and you can see through it, that data is scratched. It's done pretty much, other than that one rare case that I showed, which I don't know. That's probably missing something, but it's not enough for the PlayStation 3 to give a shit, so I don't. So that's some of the experiences that I've had. Some of those I haven't really seen documented on YouTube, and the only times I've seen, like with the actual disc rot that I experienced, I've only seen articles on from years ago. So hopefully this gives some sort of insight into how to help preserve your games or whatever. Don't throw silica packets in the case thinking that's an instant fix. It's not. If you make them too dry, they'll crack like my Silent Hill did. Mileage will vary. People can complain all day about the paper sleeves, but if you've got 360 games and they've got their stock cases, if you really, really, really care about it, put it into a sleeve and put it in a side, especially if you're going to get it out and play it a whole bunch, put it back in, get it out, play it a bunch. Don't rely on those, or put them in an older case, like a PS2 case that has the little, like even the PS3 cases, these cases that have the little pushy bits that are in them, these work great for that. If you don't want to use a 360 case, and if you want to save room, because these are smaller and you've got a small shelf for them, put them in one of these pushy ones, not those snap ones that are on the 360 cases, or put them in sleeves and just slide them in there. It's fine. I just want to make sure to get this out there in kind of some sort of fashion so that people know about those particular cases, because everybody's got a story or opinion on anything, and there's always, all of us have that knee-jerk reaction of, you know, oh shit, I've got to protect my media, so I need to go overboard with it. So that's where the silica packet and other stuff comes from. You know, you don't need a dehumidifier, you don't need a humidifier, you don't need silica packets. Just use your common sense. Don't use 360 cases.